AITA for refusing to pay for my niece's college after she publicly humiliated me. I 45 female have always been close to my brother, Mike 47 male, and his daughter, Emily 18 female. I made the decision to be child-free a long time ago, and while that choice has brought me peace and freedom, it also came with its fair share of judgments and unsolicited opinions from family and strangers alike. Despite that, I've tried to channel the energy and resources I have into nurturing the relationships I value most. Emily has always been a big part of that. I've been in Emily's life since the day she was born. I held her tiny hand in the hospital, babysat her when Mike and his wife, Laura, needed a break, and attended every one of her school plays, soccer games, and milestones. She was the closest thing I had to a child of my own, and in many ways, I poured my love and attention into her. From a young age, Emily was a bright and curious kid, and I always encouraged her interests. She loved reading, so I'd take her to bookstores and let her pick out whatever books she wanted. When she got into painting, I bought her supplies and even paid for art classes. Over the years, I also started saving money for her college education. It wasn't something I ever promised outright, but I quietly earmarked a significant amount of my savings with the intention of helping her when the time came. Growing up, I didn't have the same opportunities, and I wanted to make sure she wouldn't have to struggle the way I did. I never saw it as a burden. It felt like the least I could do for someone I loved so much. Fast forward to last month. Emily graduated from high school, and the whole family was thrilled. Mike and Laura organized a huge party to celebrate her achievements, inviting friends, family, and even some of her teachers. I was, of course, on the guest list, and I wouldn't have missed it for the world. I even went out of my way to pick out a thoughtful gift, a leather-bound journal because she loves writing, along with a heartfelt card about how proud I was of her. It felt good to see her succeed and know that I had played a small part in her journey. The party was lively, with laughter and good food. Emily looked radiant in her graduation dress, and I could tell she was genuinely happy. At one point during the evening, she stood up to give a little speech. Everyone quieted down, and she started thanking people, her parents for their unwavering support, her grandparents for always being there, her friends for the laughs and memories. It was sweet and touching, until she turned her attention to me. And a big thanks to Aunt for not having kids so she could spoil me like I'm hers. Must be nice having all that extra money and no responsibilities. The room erupted into laughter. I froze, completely caught off guard. My stomach dropped, and I could feel my face flush as every single pair of eyes in the room turned toward me. All I could do was force a weak smile. I felt humiliated. Sure, I've heard jokes about being child-free before, some playful, some hurtful, but this one stung in a way I didn't expect. It felt like a slap in the face, especially because I've gone out of my way to be there for her, to save for her, to make her life easier. What hurt even more was the reaction of the people around me. Mike and Laura laughed along with the crowd, clearly not seeing anything wrong with what she'd said. It felt like a betrayal. I excused myself from the room shortly after and spent the rest of the evening feeling like an outsider at a party I had been so excited to attend. After the party, I couldn't shake the feeling of hurt and resentment. I decided to talk to Emily privately before leaving. I gently told her that what she said during her speech had hurt me and that I didn't appreciate being singled out like that. I expected her to be apologetic or at least acknowledge my feelings, but instead, she rolled her eyes and said, "Oh, come on, it was just a joke. You're being way too sensitive." I was stunned. I tried to explain that it wasn't about the joke itself but the lack of respect it showed, especially given how much I've done for her over the years. She shrugged and walked away, clearly not interested in continuing the conversation. Feeling defeated, I left without saying much else to anyone. The next day, I called Mike to talk about what had happened. I thought maybe he'd understand where I was coming from, but his response shocked me even more. "Teenagers can be dumb sometimes," he said casually. "Don't take it personally." She didn't mean anything by it. I tried to explain that it wasn't just a teenager being dumb, it was the culmination of years of effort and sacrifice being dismissed as a joke. He didn't seem to get it. "You're overreacting," he said. "It's not that deep." But it was that deep to me. For weeks, I replayed the moment in my head, questioning whether I was being too sensitive. I tried to brush it off, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much it bothered me. I had sacrificed so much of my time and resources to support Emily, only to be publicly mocked for it. And the fact that she couldn't even offer a simple apology? That was the final straw. After a lot of soul-searching, I made a decision, would withdraw my offer to pay for her college. It wasn't about being petty or vindictive, it was about setting a boundary and standing up for myself. I felt like Emily needed to understand that her actions had consequences and that respect is a two-way street. I called Mike to let him know, and predictably, he was furious. "Are you seriously punishing her for one harmless joke?" he yelled. "You're being selfish and spiteful." I tried to explain that it wasn't just about the joke, it was about the lack of respect and gratitude. He refused to see my side, accusing me of holding a grudge and taking things too far. Emily, for her part, hasn't reached out to apologize or even discuss the situation. It's as if she doesn't think she did anything wrong. Now, I'm left questioning myself. Am I being too harsh? Should I have just let it go and continued supporting her? Or was I right to stand my ground and demand the respect I deserve? Update 1. A few weeks after the graduation party, the sting of Emily's speech still lingered. I tried to put it out of my mind, but no matter how much I distracted myself, the memory of that moment kept bubbling back to the surface. I avoided family gatherings and declined calls from Mike and Laura. I needed space to process everything. My feelings were a messy cocktail of hurt, disappointment, and, if I'm honest, a little resentment. I had spent years supporting Emily, pouring time, energy, and money into making sure she had opportunities one never did, and in one careless moment, it felt like she had dismissed all of that. I wasn't just upset about the speech itself, it was everything that came after. Emily hadn't apologized. Not once. Mike and Laura hadn't seemed to take it seriously, brushing me off like I was the one making a big deal out of nothing. For weeks, I felt like I was walking around with a weight on my chest, replaying the laughter, the dismissive tone, the sheer audacity of her words. It wasn't even about the money, it was about respect, and at that moment, it felt like I had none in their eyes. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed. It was Emily. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Part of me thought she might finally be calling to apologize, and I wanted to give her that chance. Her voice on the other end was cheerful, almost overly sweet, as if nothing had ever happened. She started with small talk, asking how I was doing, mentioning how busy she'd been with college preparations, and thanking me again for coming to her graduation party. It all felt rehearsed, like she was working up to something. I listened politely, waiting for her to get to the point. After a few minutes of pleasantries, her tone shifted slightly. She started saying how much she loved me, how I had always been there for her, and how much she appreciated everything I had done for her over the years. On the surface, her words sounded genuine, but something about them felt off, too polished, too calculated. I've known Emily her entire life, and while I'd like to believe she really meant what she was saying, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was buttering me up. My suspicions were confirmed when she started talking about college. She mentioned how excited she was about the next chapter of her life and how much it meant to her to have my support. Then she paused, as if waiting for me to respond. When I didn't immediately jump in, she sighed and said, "You know what I mean, Auntie. You've always been so generous. You love helping me out." It was clear what she was hinting at, but I wasn't about to let her off the hook that easily. I asked her directly what she wanted from me. There was a long pause on her end, and then she laughed nervously, saying, "Oh, you know. You already know. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to play along. I told her, flat out, that I wouldn't be giving her the money I had saved for her college. There was silence on the other end, followed by a stunned, almost disbelieving, "Wait, what?" She sounded completely blindsided, as if the thought of me saying no had never even crossed her mind. She stammered for a moment before asking why I would suddenly change my mind after all these years. I reminded her of what she said during her speech at the party. I told her how much it had hurt to be reduced to a punchline in front of the entire family, to have everything I had done for her brushed off as nothing more than the result of my extra money and no responsibilities. She immediately tried to dismiss it, saying it was just a joke and that I was being too sensitive. But I didn't let her off the hook this time. I told her that jokes have meaning and that words can hurt, even when they're said casually. She didn't seem to get it. Instead of apologizing, she doubled down, saying that she knew I liked spending money on her and that it wasn't a big deal for me to pay for her college. "You've always loved spoiling me," she said, her voice light and casual, as if that justified everything. "This time it's just a little more, but I know it won't be hard for you." I was completely shocked. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Her entitlement was staggering, and it hit me like a ton of bricks just how little she understood or appreciated what I had done for her over the years. She didn't see the sacrifices I had made to save that money. She didn't see the years of hard work, the nights I spent worrying about her future, or the times I said no to things I wanted so that I could say yes to her. All she saw was the end result, the money, the gifts, the support, and she thought it was her right to have them. At that moment, something inside me shifted. The hurt I had been carrying for weeks turned into a kind of resolute clarity. I realized that I had been enabling her entitlement by always saying yes, by always putting her needs and wants above my own, by never setting boundaries. I told her, as calmly as I could, that this wasn't about the money. It was about respect, and right now, I didn't feel like she had any for me. I told her that she needed to learn that actions have consequences and that sometimes, when you hurt people, you don't get to just brush it off as a joke and expect everything to go back to normal. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "I didn't think it was that serious." Her tone was flat, almost dismissive, like she still didn't fully grasp what I was saying. That hurt even more, but it also solidified my decision. I told her that maybe, in time, she would understand, but for now, my decision was final. I wouldn't be paying for her college. She didn't argue after that, she just muttered something about needing to go and hung up the phone. As I sat there, staring at my phone, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me felt guilty. This was Emily, the girl I had loved and supported for her entire life. But another part of me felt relief, like I had finally stood up for myself after years of being taken for granted. It wasn't an easy decision, and I knew it would likely strain my relationship with her and the rest of my family. But in that moment, I felt like it was the right one. Update 2. A few days after my conversation with Emily, I thought things had finally settled. I had made my position clear, and while it hadn't been easy, I felt confident in my decision. I didn't hear anything from Emily after that call, which was a relief in some ways, though it also left me with a lingering sadness. She had always been such an important part of my life, and now it felt like there was this massive wedge between us. Still, I told myself that standing up for myself was the right thing to do, even if it hurt. But just as I was beginning to feel a sense of closure, another storm hit. This time, it was Mike. It started with a text. I had been sitting on my couch, unwinding after a long day, when my phone buzzed. Seeing Mike's name pop up didn't surprise me. I figured he might reach out eventually, but the message itself caught me off guard. It was short, but the tone was sharp. "It's not good to go back on your word. Emily's counting on you." I stared at the screen, rereading the message a few times to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. Was he seriously accusing me of not keeping my word? After everything that had happened? I took a deep breath before responding, trying to keep my emotions in check. I told him that it wasn't fair for him to guilt me like that, especially considering how hurt I had been by Emily's behavior. I reminded him that I had already explained my reasons for withdrawing my support, and that this wasn't about breaking a promise, it was about setting boundaries and standing up for myself. But apparently, my explanation didn't land the way I hoped it would. What followed was a barrage of messages from Mike. He insisted that I was being unreasonable, that Emily loved me and had always looked up to me, and that I was letting one minor incident ruin our relationship. He said I was being vindictive and that I needed to think about how much this would hurt Emily. According to him, my decision was selfish and immature, and I needed to do the right thing and follow through on my promise. Reading his messages made my blood boil. It wasn't just that he was dismissing my feelings, it was the sheer entitlement in his words. He wasn't asking me to reconsider, he was demanding that I pay, as if it were my obligation, as if I were somehow responsible for his daughter's education. The audacity of it all left me stunned. I decided to call him. Texting felt too impersonal, and I needed him to hear my voice. I needed him to understand just how completely out of line he was being. This wasn't a conversation I could have over a screen, trading short, clipped messages back and forth while my blood boiled with every new notification. I needed him to hear the frustration in my voice, the weight of everything I had been holding in for weeks. As the phone rang, I took a deep breath, bracing myself for what I already knew would be an infuriating exchange. When Mike answered, his tone immediately set me on edge. He sounded calm, even smug, like he'd been waiting for this moment, confident that he could talk me into submission. There was an air of self-assuredness in his voice, as if he believed that he could just say the right combination of words and I would fold like I always had before. That smugness only fueled my frustration, making my grip on the phone tighten. I didn't even bother with pleasantries, I went straight to the point. I told him, as firmly and directly as I could, that he had no right, absolutely no right, to lecture me about keeping promises. Not after everything that had happened, and certainly not after the way both he and Emily had treated me in the aftermath of her speech. I didn't stop there. I reminded him of all the ways I had been there for Emily over the years, the birthdays, the holidays, the school events I never missed. I reminded him of the countless times I had stepped in to help, not because I was obligated to, but because I cared about her. I had supported her dreams, nurtured her interests, and yes, saved a significant amount of my hard-earned money to make sure she had opportunities one never did. But I told him, as plainly as I could, that my decision to withdraw that financial support wasn't something I came to lightly. It wasn't about being petty or vindictive, it was about respect, something both he and Emily seemed to think they could withhold without consequence. But instead of acknowledging any of that, instead of showing even a shred of understanding or remorse, Mike doubled down. His tone shifted slightly, becoming more insistent, almost patronizing. He started painting this elaborate picture of Emily as a devastated young girl, utterly heartbroken because her beloved aunt, the one she had always looked up to, had betrayed her. According to him, my decision would scar her, leaving her feeling abandoned and unloved, as if I were somehow responsible for irreparably damaging her self-esteem. The more he talked, the angrier I became. He wasn't just guilt-tripping me, he was weaponizing my love for Emily, twisting it into something he could use to manipulate me. He didn't stop there. He went on about how much Emily deserved my support, as though my affection for her was supposed to automatically translate into financial responsibility. He kept emphasizing how close we'd always been, how much she loved me, as though that love somehow obligated me to pay for her education. His words were dripping with entitlement, and I could feel my patience wearing thinner and thinner with every sentence. It wasn't just the entitlement that got to me, it was the complete lack of accountability, the way he was trying to absolve himself of any responsibility while making me out to be the villain. Then he said the thing that truly pushed me over the edge. He told me, in the most matter-of-fact tone, that he had been counting on me to pay for her college. He said that because of my promise, he hadn't saved as much as he could have, and now he wasn't in a position to cover her tuition. He said it like it was a foregone conclusion, like it was entirely my fault that he hadn't prepared for his daughter's future. Therefore, according to him, I had to keep my word. There was no wiggle room, no consideration for the circumstances, just a flat-out declaration that it was now my responsibility to fix the situation he had failed to plan for. That was it. That was the breaking point. Any lingering patience or goodwill I had left evaporated in an instant. I told him, point blank, that I wasn't Emily's mother. I wasn't the one responsible for her education, he was. I reminded him, as calmly as I could manage, that he was her father, and it was his job, not mine, to make sure she had what she needed. I could hear the silence on the other end of the line, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like the weight of my words was finally sinking in. For a brief, fleeting moment, I thought he might actually understand. I thought he might finally realize how completely unreasonable his expectations were. But then he came back with something that made my blood run cold. He said that I had made a promise, and because he had trusted me to keep it, he wasn't going to pay. He said it so matter-of-factly, like it was the most logical conclusion in the world. He said that I had made a promise, and because he had trusted me to keep it, he wasn't going to pay. He said it was my responsibility now, that I had taken it on the moment I offered to help. I was floored. The sheer audacity of what he was saying left me speechless for a moment. He wasn't even trying to hide his entitlement anymore. He had essentially handed off his parental responsibilities to me, and now he was acting like I was the one who had failed. The arrogance, the entitlement, the complete lack of accountability, it was staggering. My anger, which had been simmering throughout the conversation, finally reached a boiling point. I knew, in that moment, that there was no reasoning with him. No amount of explanation or logic would make him see just how wrong he was. All I could do was stand my ground and refuse to let him guilt me into cleaning up his mess. I told him, as calmly as I could manage, that I wasn't going to pay for Emily's college. Not now, not ever. I told him that he needed to take responsibility for his own child and figure it out himself. Whether that meant taking out loans, finding scholarships, or cutting back on expenses, that was on him, not me. He tried to argue, but I cut him off. I told him that I had done more than enough for Emily over the years, and I wasn't going to let him or anyone else guilt me into doing more. I said that if he had been counting on me to cover the cost of her education, that was his mistake, not mine. By the time the call ended, I was shaking with anger. I couldn't believe how entitled he had been, how completely unwilling he was to take responsibility for his own choices. The worst part was knowing that this conversation would only widen the rift between us. I had always been close to Mike, and part of me wanted to believe that he would understand my side eventually. But after that call, I wasn't so sure. So, am I AITA for finally refusing to pay for my niece's college?